Detective Kenmains here from Unsolved No More. Hey, you guys that have watched the channel know that I certainly would never endorse something that I didn't personally use. That's why I want to talk about factor meals, because factor meals are definitely something that I use on a daily basis. The thing I like about factor meals, man, I'm telling you, hey, they're fresh and never frozen, and that is important to me for my diet. It's really easy to plate and get on the table. And also a third thing is the variety of stuff you get. And you know what I really like about it, and I didn't mention this, is the shakes, the smoothies. I love them. This July, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and enter the code unsolvednm50 for 50% off your first box. Let me repeat that. Head to factor75.com or click the link below to get 50% off your first box when you enter the code unsolvednm50.
Yeah, let's talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
Columbia, Missourian, March 20th, 1950. Page 1. Girl strangled after struggle. Police believe victim was telephoning for help when attacker reached her. A 13-year-old babysitter was raped and murdered Saturday night after her attacker interrupted what investigating officers believe was a desperate attempt to telephone police for help. Miss Janett Christman, daughter of C.E. Christman, owner of Ernie's Steakhouse, was found dead at 1:35 a.m. yesterday by Mr. and Mrs. Ed Romick on the floor of their living room, 1015 Stewart Road, with an electric iron cord twisted around her neck. Girl killed by strangling. Dr. M. Pinson Neal, university pathologist, who performed the autopsy, said the girl had been raped and the death was caused by asphyxiation by strangulation. He fixed the time of death between 10:30 and 11 p.m. The Jefferson Junior High School student's charge, Greg Romick, 3, who was sleeping in the back bedroom, was not disturbed. An immediate investigation under the direction of prosecuting attorney Carl F. Sapp was begun by Columbia Police, the Sheriff's Office, and the State Highway Patrol. Fingerprints found. Fingerprints taken from inside the house and footprints in the yard are now being studied by the Highway Patrol laboratory technicians. Bloodhounds from Angelo Prison Farm were used in an attempt to track the killer. Romick told police that he and his wife discovered the body when they returned home from Moon Valley Villa, where they had played bridge during the evening. They checked at once to see if their child was safe and then called the police. Romick said he noticed when he picked up the phone receiver that it was not placed properly on the hook. Police telephone call. Earlier that evening at 10:55 p.m., Mrs. Romick had phoned her home and got a busy signal. About the same time, Patrolman Roy McCowan said he received a phone call at the police station and heard what sounded like a girl screaming hysterically. The connection was broken suddenly before she could identify herself. Police Chief E.M. Gene Pond said the call could not be traced because the test board at the telephone company is not manned at that late hour. He added that the call was probably of too short a duration to check even if someone had been at the test board. Upon questioning the other 5 subscribers whose phone are on the Romick party line, Chief Pond found that the last call had been placed at 10:35 p.m. This information supports the theory that the signal heard by Mrs. Romack was Miss Christman's vain effort to get help. Girl's hair matted with blood. Police Lieutenant Joe Douglas was the first to arrive at the Romack home shortly after 1:35 a.m. Miss Christman was lying on the floor near the piano in a pool of blood, he said. Her hair was matted with blood, and there was cuts on her head and face. She was wearing a red scarf around her shoulders, a maroon sweater, a light beige skirt, white bobby socks, and low-heel shoes. Her clothing was disarranged. Her coat was on the divan, and her purse and gloves were on the piano. Lieutenant Douglas called Chief Pond, who in turn notified SAP, Sheriff Glenn Powell, and State Highway Patrol headquarters in Jefferson City. Dr. Roland Lattinson, summoned by Lieutenant Douglas, pronounced the girl dead. Dr. Harry Griffith, coroner, was called also. Romack told police he picked up Miss Christman at her home above the restaurant, 1005 East Walnut Street, and took her to his house. The brunette teenager had worked for the family before, and Romack said he had shown her how to load and shoot a shotgun, which he kept in a living room closet. The girl evidently had no chance to use the gun. Bloodhounds find trail. Gus Larrabee, superintendent of the Allegor Prison Farm, drove to Columbia with 3 bloodhounds and joined the investigating officers at 3 a.m. The dogs picked up a trail which led them to a bus stop at West Boulevard and West Ash Street, but lost the scent there. Pond said questioning of the bus drivers yielded no new lead. In attempting to reconstruct the crime, Sapp said the entry into the living room was made through a window on the west side. A sawhorse had been brought from the northeast corner of the house and placed beneath the window, which is about 6 feet above the ground. Sapp said the assailant apparently climbed through the 2-paned lower half of the window after knocking it out with his fist or some object. He then crawled across the grand piano next to the window, leaving an undetermined print on top. Girl resisted fiercely. Sapp said officers could speculate only on the assault that followed. Miss Christman is believed to have been struck while trying to use the phone, locating in a wall niche behind the living room and the dining room. She fled into the kitchen, where she probably was struck again in a punching manner by some pipe-like weapon, which left round wounds 2/5 of an inch in diameter upon her face and head. She ran from the kitchen into the hall, but was overcome there and then probably dragged back into the living room, near the piano where she was attacked. The rapist apparently obtained the electric iron cord from the utility room off the hall as he fought with the 135-pound girl. Blood was found near the phone, on the refrigerator in the kitchen, on the hall walls, on a chair in the living room, and beneath the girl's body. How the assailant left the house was not determined because the back door, which had been locked when the Romacks left, was ajar, and the front door was unlocked. The porch light, which had been turned off, was lit. The lights in the house were on, and the Venetian blinds on the front windows were open. The blinds on the west side of the living room were closed. Furniture in the room had not been moved or upset. Police find footprints. Police found several footprints beneath the window, which were covered with ice, Sapp said. A coroner's jury viewed the body at 2:20 p.m. yesterday at the Parker funeral service. Members were Harold Cox, W.E. Christian, Charles W. Romer, E.F. Ruther, L.T. Proctor, and Grover Owen. 25 murder suspects are questioned. Headline: No good clues, Sapp declares. Highway patrolmen aiding in search. Crime varies from recent attacks. Prosecuting attorney Carl F. Sapp said today that all law enforcement agencies are working on an around-the-clock basis in the search for the killer of Miss Janett Christman, who was raped and strangled Saturday night while she was babysitting. More than 25 men were questioned yesterday, Chief E.M. Gene Pond said after police began picking up suspects at 10 a.m. Chief Pond placed the force on 12-hour watches and all days off were canceled. Pond said rescheduling of duty would enable him to put 5 more men on investigation besides maintaining regular patrols. Highway Patrol helps. 2 state highway patrol troopers from Jefferson City, Sergeants John Williams and H. Wells, under Lieutenant P.E. Cole, were assisting in the investigation. Williams, a laboratory technician, is making extensive tests of clues, including fingerprints in the home and footprints around the property. Also, cooperating are the Sheriff's Office and State Highway Patrol Sergeant James Junkins and Trooper L.R. Schwartz. The entire investigation is under SAP's direction. No tangible clues. There are no tangible suspects at this time, SAP said, but we still are evaluating clues. In a KFRU radio broadcast last night, SAP appealed to all citizens to aid in the hunt by reporting prowlers or unusual noises around their homes. Greg, 2.5-year-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Romack, 1015 Stewart Road, was questioned by his father in the hope the child heard or saw something during the night. Romack told SAP the boy was unable to tell him anything and evidently slept through the struggle between Miss Christman and her assailant. 2 men, perhaps. We're going to work on the theory that 1 man did it, SAP said, but it might have been 2 men. SAP said that, as far as investigations show, now there is no similarities between this case and the 2 rapes and attempted rape last fall, except for the general location of the crimes. SAP did point out the similarity between this case and one in 1946, when Floyd Cochran raped and killed Mary Lou Jenkins, not more than 2 blocks from the Romack home. She also was strangled with an electric cord. Cochran was convicted of the slaying and executed in the gas chamber at Jefferson City in September 1947. Jake Bradford, charged with the attempted rape of a Stevens College day student last November and the rape of a babysitter last October, is to be tried March 28th in circuit court. Both of these crimes occurred within a few blocks of where Miss Christman was killed. Prowler reported. Miss Sarah Johnson, 1004 Locust Street, who was babysitting at the home of R.G. Wiley, 42 West Boulevard South, Saturday night, told police yesterday that a prowler had tried the back door of the Wiley home about 10 p.m., but finding it locked, disappeared down the rear driveway. The incident occurred about half an hour before Janett Christman was slain only 2 blocks away, police estimated. Miss Wiley said this morning that their collie dog, which always challenged anyone approaching the house, has been missing since Friday night. The dog has been with the family for 5 years and has never disappeared before, she said. The Romacks have been staying with his father, R.W. Romack, 4 West Boulevard South, since the murder. SAP and assisting police officers will be on a television cast tonight over KSD-TV St. Louis. Okay, welcome back to Unsolved No More. Today we're going to talk about the rape and murder of this unsolved homicide of Janett Christman from 1950, 60-something years old. It's amazing to me when I was looking at this case how crime hasn't changed throughout the years. And this is, granted, 60 years seems like a long time, but not, in reality it's not. But we could go back to the 1800s and see crimes that are committed in the same way, the same patterns, and it shows you the human behavioral patterns that allow us to determine what type of offender committed the crime. Not foolproof, not always, but generally speaking, it's usually correct. So we're going to apply some methods on this case. This case has a lot of rabbit holes, which a lot of quote-unquote famous cases have. It's our fault as society. It's also law enforcement's fault that these rabbit holes are created to begin with, when it doesn't have to be. It could be simpler. But rabbit holes in this case meaning a lot of different suspects, a lot of different potentially case linkage with other cases. And these are not bad things, okay? It's not bad things to try to have case linkage and find out whether a case is linked to other solved or unsolved cases. But for this purpose, I'm not worried too much. You know, I could spend a couple hours explaining each case linkage and either going with it or debunking it. I don't want to do that for this particular video. What I want to try to do is focus on the crime scene, the crime itself, and what it shows us, what it teaches us, and ultimately maybe who's responsible for it. As I was researching this case, you know, there was a gentleman's name kept coming up as a suspect. I believe his name was Mueller. And I don't, again, have too much problem mentioning the name. It's out there. But I won't harp on it. I won't drum on it. Mr. Mueller has passed away, I believe, at the ripe old age of 83, maybe in 2006, something like that. But he was, from everything that I researched, the main suspect in this case. But as I was researching, I also found myself being very cautious, meaning you have to be cautious of what you're researching. So let me give you an example. If you just go on Google and type in Janett Christman murder, you'll get a bunch of different websites, you know, of people explaining the case. Now, you don't know, I don't know, who are these people? What are their qualifications? Are they journalists? Are they investigators? Are they just true crime enthusiasts? Who's putting out this information? And where did they get that information? See, because as time goes by, cases get added to. They get distorted. And by the time it gets to you, some of it may or may not be true. And that's why it's important always to, number one, check your sources, know where you're getting this information, because if not, you're part of the problem. Because all you're doing is spreading more false information. So when I get on a website, you know, generally, as you know, if I don't have police reports, I go to newspaper clippings. Now, they are not always the best source of information, but I will take them usually over a web blogger's page. Call me crazy. That's just the way I am. I've caught a lot of wrong information in newspapers. But again, the closer you get to the crime, and you can read those facts, because in 1950, when this crime occurred, and I went back to those newspapers and looked at information, compared to 2024, it's different. There's just different things, and I'll give you examples so you don't think that I'm just shooting off my mouth and not knowing what I'm talking about. And I wrote it down here. For one, puncture wounds in this case. I have it listed here. So this here is my kind of blank Unsolved No More template. Okay, this is what I use. This is what I use for the most part when I look at cases for this channel. I don't do this for law enforcement or when I'm hired or retained. I don't use this template, but for this channel I do, because it gives me a sense of organization. I can write things down, and I have a box here for red flags. Now, in earlier accounts, there's no mention of like puncture wounds. And then you go to a later account and there it is. So it's your job and my job to figure out, wait, who's right here and where did this come out? Sometimes it's not false. Sometimes what happens is police will obviously keep things close to their vest. They don't want it leaked out, so they may not say it. So in 1950, you don't hear about anything. But then in 2024, you read it, and it's because, hey, time has passed. that information has been leaked out through the years, and it's not false. That's a good thing for cold case investigators. The more information, you want that. Knowing that there's puncture wounds after 50, 60 years, and not just thinking she was strangled, that's significant when you are assessing the scene of a crime. So, but your job's just starting. And what I mean by that is now you got to figure out whether it's rumor or it actually happened. So that's just one of the things, one of the areas to be cautious with when you're working in old cold case such as Janett Christman. So, you know, I'm not too technologically savvy all the time, but in front of me I have a monitor, like it's a big screen TV, and on it, actually, let me see if I can show you by hitting this button. There you go. So right there is what I'm looking at, and that's Janett Christman. Now Janett, this is from the Kansas City Times, March 20th, 1950. And as you see, look at that picture there of Janett. She looks like a librarian, right? Look at her. All right, come back to me. And that picture is the first thing that I noticed when I researched this case. Now I did, if you remember Crux Zero, where I was reading some of these first accounts of murders, and I did Janett Christman. And that's the first thing that stuck out to me. She looks like a grown lady. She looks like an adult. She's 13 years old. Did I mention that? So that may or may not play into this assessment. But I keep the photograph of the victim up in front of me on this monitor that I can refer to. And I used to do that at when I was in the detective's office, district attorney's office. When I was a detective, I would have pictures of the victims in front of me. Why? I don't know. That's just something that I always felt like if I was slipping, that they would, you know, that reminds me. You know, they ain't talking to me. Trust me, I've asked them many times to talk to me. It doesn't happen. But it reminds me. They were living human beings, full of life, and then just gone. And now all they are words on a tombstone or in a newspaper. And it's sad. But I've come to realize that death is part of life. Now, how we die, well, that's a different story. And it's my job, and was my job, and will be my job until I die, to work on these type of cases. So, Janett Christman, white female, 13 years old. She was in 8th grade. She weighed 135 pounds. Now, why do I give that information? The weight, because of the photograph that I showed of her. She's not your typical 13-year-old, okay? And when the struggle ensues, we need to know whether it tells us a little something. It could tell us, not always, about the offender. And when I get to the crime scene and things like that, I will explain more. The location of this was 1015 Stewart Road, Columbia, Missouri. And again, this was March 18th, 1950. So what I like to do is look at everything. We're looking at the location of the house, the overview of the house, any houses around, rural location, in the city. Where was she at? In this particular case, young Janett Christman was babysitting, okay? She was babysitting for Mr. and Mrs. Ed Romack. They had a 3-year-old child who was actually asleep in the bedroom when this occurred. Now, let's talk a little bit about Janett, okay? Remember, victimology is always important, but sometimes people put too much of an emphasis on victimology. Victimology sometimes will lead you nowhere. It's like a fancy word that people like to throw out, okay? Would it matter if Janett Christman was a smoker, drinker at age 13 who got in trouble, hung out with a biker gang, or if she was the latter, a good student, got good grades, never got in trouble, had a good home life? Do they matter? Yes and no. No, that she, regardless of what her victimology is, she had her demise through violent means. Yet, because of those different possible victimologies, that is the reason it's important, because it could lead you to an offender. Meaning, hey, her boyfriend was in a biker gang. He was 28 years old. Yeah, I know she was 13. She smoked Marlboro cigarettes. She drank. Her boyfriends were involved with sex trafficking, the running of guns and drugs. Well, yeah, that puts her at a higher risk of being a victim, right? So it gives you a source of where to look for her potential offender. On the other side of that, which is what Janett really was, is somebody who the principal said got good, very good grades, was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, had a lot of friends. One of the things that she did that solidified, because let's be honest, when someone dies, I have very rarely, if ever, seen like the newspaper the next day say, oh, they were a horrible person. She was promiscuous, she was rude, ignorant, dirty. Yeah, you never see that because people don't want to talk about victims in that light. But, so when I'm reading this about, in all cases, about victimology, and she's a good person, good student, it's so atypical. It is said in every Dateline you've ever watched. Every 48 hours, they were a good person, no enemies. And part of that might be true. So when I read that in cases, I just kind of, I almost just brush it off. Almost. Because everybody says that. Until you go and talk to people who really knew them, and even then, sometimes they're very hesitant to talk bad about a deceased person. It's just the way it is. But one of the things that she did in action, not what somebody said about her, it's an action that she did, that allowed me to believe, okay, she is a responsible, at least, person. And that is, she had a party to attend with schoolmates that night. And yet she chose to go babysit this 3-year-old kid for this family that she knew. To me, that action speaks more than all those words from the principal. So, okay, now I'm going to believe this stuff that is good that is being said about Janett Christman. So, I believe it was around 7:30 at night when Janett arrives. And how she arrives is not important, but because I don't remember reading how she arrived. She didn't drive. The weather was horrible that night. It was freezing. It was sleeting. It rains, and that becomes important in the assessment later as well. And also, Ed Romick, the gentleman who she was babysitting for, the husband and wife duo, waited in the car when they came home from where they went to take her home. So I do know that. She didn't have transportation there. Around 7:30, the husband and wife say, hey, we're going to go play bridge, some card game. Cards used to be a big thing. That's another thing, a bygone era. Hardly anybody does that anymore. Just because of technology. Yet, that's what they were going to do. Around 10:55, 11 o'clock, Ed Romick's wife stops the bridge game to call home because of thunder. And she thought maybe her child, 3-year-old, that Janett is babysitting, would be scared. So she called home and she got a busy signal. Okay? Now, initially, that's not a big deal, right? But it is a big deal. Because at the same time, the police department is getting a call from a female who is screaming, trying to get help, and then the phone just goes silent. Now, I do believe in coincidences, okay? That's another cliche that people like to say. I don't believe in coincidence. Well, you haven't looked hard enough, okay? But in this case, they are related. Now, I don't believe that they happened at the exact same moment in time. But relatively short amount of time, 15 minutes, those calls happened. Mom did not think too much of it. They were coming home soon, so the phone was busy. Maybe Janett was talking to her parents. Maybe she's talking to a boyfriend. It didn't really occur to her. It didn't matter. She didn't get through. But what was happening at that house was horrific. And Janett tried to call for help, and she couldn't get any, unfortunately. So around 1:35 a.m., the Romacks decide to come home from their bridge game. As I stated earlier, Mr. Romack stayed in the car waiting for his wife. They pull into the driveway. She goes in to get Janett. He stays out into the car because he's just going to run her home, right? Now, these conspiracy theorists or people that like to go down rabbit holes, right off the bat, they're going to say, whoa, that's a red flag. Mr. Romack, he stayed in the car. He didn't want to go in because he knew what was in there, the body of Janett. Please don't listen to those type of people. As soon as you get whiff of that, of somebody being like that, just turn the channel, block them, don't go back, don't support them, okay? It's not worth it. Again, it just solidifies rumors and innuendos, and these cases deserve so much better. So his wife goes in, he hears her scream, he gets out of the car, he goes in, and the horrifying sight that they saw inside the house. It's sad. It's sad. They run upstairs because first thing they want to do is check on their young son, and he is fine. He's asleep in his room or whatever room he's in upstairs in the crib, and he's fine. But Janett is not fine. Husband goes to call police, and what he notices is that the phone is off the hook and in an unusual place, like it's wedged between something. Again, that goes to solidify the thought that she was calling police when this happened. Janett is laying on her back in the living room. And I don't show pictures of victims on here dead. I did see a picture of her, but I won't show that here. If you're interested, it's out there on the internet and you can go see it. But I won't disrespect them here. But I will show this picture. And you can see something very important here. Janett's legs are in a spread-eagled position. Okay? Now, it's my experience when I see this that it brings about a certain type of offender to me. When somebody does this, it's done as either a shock value for the person that's finding her, okay, or to degrade that victim. Now, it's also, see, this is very important, so please listen up. You can't lump every single murder in certain categories, okay? Like because of these legs being spread open. Some amateurs, and even some professionals that I know, will look at that and they will say, okay, she's like that because the offender is trying to shock whoever finds her. And the reason they say that is because they've worked on a previous case, maybe a person was arrested, and they asked that offender, why did you spread eagle her like that? And the offender said, because I knew that police were going to show up and I wanted to show them what I did. I wanted to shock them. So then they incorporate that in their methodology, in their studies. And so when they see another case like that, they say, well, that's the reason it's done. And that is not true. See, that's the trap. That's the trap that investigators fall into, and professionals. Because what happens, young Janett was sexually assaulted, okay? She was raped. There's no question about that here. When he's done strangling her, raping her, and he leaves her in that position, she's wearing, as you can see here, a skirt. He has access, he can rape her like that. Maybe he's assaulting her post-mortem, or ante-mortem, or peri-mortem. Well, it doesn't matter. He is on top of her, raping her and killing her at the same time, or after she's already dead. He gets up, he's done, he's finished doing what he's doing, and her legs maintain where they are. They're spread eagled that way. There's no shock value. There's no degrading of the victim. It's just the way it happened. It is what it is. Now, if there were other indicators, such as lividity, okay, meaning if she's dead long enough in that position, let's say the offender killed her and she was on her stomach and he strangled her, because that's how she died, with a cord around her neck. He's strangling her, he's assaulting her, because you can sexually assault somebody from behind, as we all know. And he leaves her like that. She's dead for a couple hours, whatever. He's ransacking the home, and he comes back, and he flips her over, spreads her legs, poses her, and leaves. Well, now that's different, right? Because maybe lividity had set in, the pooling of the blood in certain areas because she was face down. And when he rolls her back over, those spots are still there. So you can tell she was in a different position than what she was. Well, yes, now if that's present, well, then that would make me say, okay, well, he's posing her for a reason. But we don't have that here. But we have 3 good indicators as to why she's like that. A, because he posed her for shock value, because that has been done in the past. B, because he wants to degrade her. This is an anger type of killing, which I think we can deduce later on that this is not that. Or C, it's just what it is. That's the way he got off of her, and that's the way she is. You can also see by this crime scene picture that one of her shoes is off and the other one is on. Now, does that tell us anything? Well, let's come back to that, but let's look at where this struggle ensued, okay? There's blood, shoulder length high in the hallway. There's blood in the kitchen, and then she's found in the living room. So we have 3 different places where the struggle occurred. You have a window, a side window, which you can see here. A side window to that house that is either broken, I believe it is broken. There was different things on that. Yes, it was broken, it was just opened. But there was a garden hoe next to it, which the family says was always kept in the house. And as you can see, there's a sawhorse underneath it. Now, we'll get into what all that means here in a little bit as well. But that's what you have. So, to me, that contains everything, to those 4 different areas. That's where everything occurred. Because of the time, we can assume, because of the call to the police department and the call home from the young 3-year-old's mom and got the busy signal, you can relatively say that this happened probably between 10:30 and 11 o'clock at night. That's what the medical examiner said, between 10:30 and 11. I would tend to agree with that. I see nothing to lead me away from that. But if I was on the case, I would say, hey, let's take that from 10:30, 10:55 when that call took place, and let's move that all the way till about 1:15 a.m. because that's when she was found, is at 1:30. Unless the medical examiner can point to something specific, her body temperature or something that backs that time up, I wouldn't be comfortable with just saying, hey, let's narrow this to 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. That's just me. I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. Janett's body, when found, again, on her back, one of the things that I was trying to look at, and I couldn't quite see, is the flaring of her hair. Now, what is that and why is that important? The flaring of her hair. She had, as I can see, semi-long hair. If she was being pulled, meaning to be posed, which this could be, if she was drugged, her hair would be flared up. You know what I mean? Her hair would be up here. It wouldn't be tucked underneath her head. That was important to me to try to determine. Because if her hair is flared up, she was drugged into that position, more than likely to be posed. I couldn't determine that. I couldn't see it. But with the one shoe being off, let's come back to that. All that means is it wasn't knocked off during the struggle in the hallway, and it wasn't knocked off in the kitchen. It most likely wasn't knocked off until she went down in the living room, and that's where she was being sexually assaulted. And she was trying to kick and, fight for her life. And that's when that shoe came off. Her having those shoes on is also indicative of something. Do you know what that is? To me, it means she wasn't sleeping. Now, why is that important? It's very important for the offender when he is going to break into this house, if in fact he did break into it. If she's in bed and she has to come investigate a noise, if she goes outside, her shoes should be off, right? Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, victimology would tell you that. Mr. Romick would tell you that. Hey, did you guys take off your shoes in the house? I'm going by the assumption, and I shouldn't do that, that her shoes should be off. But I will forego that thought and just say, well, at least because of what I see with the shoes, she wasn't in bed. Okay? Now, both doors were unlocked, the front door and back door. Is that important? Yes, it's important, but it's not as important as some people would like to think it is. Now, why? Well, because everything is up to the offender. The offender is in control now. After Janett is dead, he can do whatever he wants in that house. He can manipulate whatever he wants in that house. And maybe he did make entry, which police, I believe that he did. And from what I read, most people believe that he made entry through that window. And then, even if she had the doors locked, he kills her. Instead of going out that window, he just walks out the front door, unlocks it and goes. Shuts the door behind him. Police get there, doors are unlocked. Doesn't change anything, right? It just doesn't change anything. Now let's go to whether that is in fact an entry point. I have a hard time believing that the offender went in there, okay? And I'll tell you why. A couple of things bother me. Number one, the time, 10:55. Her wearing shoes. To me, that makes me believe that she wasn't in bed. Why would the offender, at that time, 10:55 at night, it's not that late, okay? The offender doesn't see a vehicle, okay? Think back at, let's use the Idaho murders, for example, where the offender isn't deterred by the amount of vehicles that he sees outside. He goes through with it. Now, for this, there is no vehicle there that I'm aware of. So the offender is going to choose to go through a window that is so elevated that he would have to drag a sawhorse over, use a garden hoe to bust out the window, which, what's that do? Creates noise to draw attention. He doesn't want to do that. And then he has to pull himself up through broken glass. It doesn't make sense. And what do I always tell you guys? If it doesn't make sense, disregard it. Okay? It's a ruse. At 10:55, she's not in bed, which means what? There's going to be a light on. More than likely. Again, it's not foolproof. Wouldn't he have, there's two doors. There's one in the back of the property. Wouldn't it be easier if you're going to force entry? If you're going to force, if you're breaking something, why break a window that's way up here and you have to pull yourself up? That makes no sense. Kick in the back door. You know, that window doesn't make sense to me. If it doesn't make sense, then it's a lie. So I believe that is what it is. That's staged to make it look like something that it isn't. And you go to the fact that the Romex said, hey, that garden tool, that hoe, was inside. It wasn't out there. So now I have two reasons to believe that it was staged. Now remember, this is a rural area. There's not too many other houses right next to it. So the offender, when he stages this, now that he knows he's been inside, okay, he's killed. He knows, okay, everything's pretty calm now. You know, like it's through. I can manipulate. I can do what I want. And what I want to do now is to make this look like something that it isn't. So I can take this garden tool that was inside the house and go outside. I can smash that window. Oh, there's a sawhorse here. Let me drag that over here to make it look like that's the way the person entered. Now, that's a lot of extra things to do. So what does that tell me? That tells me that this offender is experienced in this. This is not his first time of doing this. It tells me something else that is even more important than that. That why would you stage something? You stage something to make it look like something that it isn't. And the only reason you do that is to what? Why? It's an extracurricular activity that serves no purpose. The killing, the rape is done. You've came and you've done what you've wanted to do. But now the extra things they happen. Why? Because you have to divert the attention from you to somebody else. You have to make it look like somebody else occurred. Why? Because somebody is going to believe that it is you. Which leads me to believe that this is somebody that the Romacs know. Or Janett knew. Somehow, some way. I'm not saying they're best friends. I'm saying they went and played bridge together. I'm not saying Janett went to school with her. But they knew. And they knew that eyes were going to be kind of on them for whatever reason. Because I knew her schedule. I knew she was going to be here that night. My wife was away and I live right down the road. Something in that offender mind said, hey, they are going to be looking at me. So I have to stage this to make it look like it was not me. And that's as simple as I can make that. Now, Janett's body, let's go back to her again. What can we learn from that? One is she was strangled, but she had these puncture wounds. Because remember at the beginning, I wasn't sure whether to believe that or not. And I come to the realization, yes, I believe that those wounds are there. As you can see in this newspaper article, it lists her wounds. Now, the location of those wounds are odd to me. They're like circular wounds to her sides of her head. I can't make out what that is. I don't know. I would not believe that it's a knife. That was my first indication or first thought. And not that he used a knife to stab her. I believed, well, it's probably some sort of show of force. Meaning, hey, I have a knife. I'm putting it to your throat. You're going to do what I say. Okay? I don't believe that. Now, why don't I believe that? Because that does happen. Well, usually because then when the person is murdered, usually the murder weapon will be what? That knife, right? If you're bringing a weapon to a crime scene to commit a crime, you use that weapon. You don't look for a weapon of opportunity such as an iron cord, which is what she had wrapped very tightly around her neck. But weapons of opportunity, I've discussed these before, and it's, again, it's not a cut and dry case. meaning weapons of opportunity are usually used in a fit of rage. I think of Ellen Greenberg case. I think of Jeffrey McDonald case. When something occurs and anger takes over, it's a weapon of opportunity. It's not premeditated. You didn't bring your own weapon, you grab something. When an argument escalates to the point where violence takes place, you look for a weapon of opportunity. Now, if you bring a weapon, let's say BTK killer, you bring a weapon, you're intent on using that weapon, but not all the time. Sometimes those weapons are brought for fear, for control, and then you don't use those weapons. Why? Because you want to strangle. That's what gets you off. But when this happens, you're looking at a very, very different breed of offender. You're talking about a rare event, such as a deviant sexual offender. And there's a lot of them, but in the grand scheme of people who kill, they're 1%. They're the BTKs. They're the Joel Rifkins. The Rodney Acolas of the world. They're not the Scott Petersons. They're not the Chris Watts. Okay? These are people that get off on murder. That's just what they do. I don't see that here. So, if I don't see a rage killing here, and I don't see a rare serial killer, then what do I see? Well, I see an offender who could possibly be a serial offender, but he didn't bring a knife to control her. Okay? He didn't bring a knife or a gun to control her. Why? Way too messy. Blood on the hallway, blood on the refrigerator. Okay? She didn't have stab wounds. She had puncture wounds. Now, what's the difference? That's a good question. I would like to know more about what the medical examiner found. What is the difference between a puncture and a stab? Maybe it's the same thing, but a knife wasn't used. Those puncture wounds really, it's troublesome to me in this case. This has the makings, I'll put it that way. It has the makings of a deviant sexual offender there. Not a serial killer, but somebody who was experienced at this. And that's why that case linkage that I talked about in the beginning is so important to look at. I'm betting the offender lived less than a mile, 2 miles from this location, not a stranger to her. He did this before. He may not have killed before, and that's what I was getting at by saying he wasn't a serial offender. I don't believe he necessarily had killed before. He may have, maybe once. And the reason I say that is he couldn't control the situation. He did ultimately accomplish his goal, but it didn't go strictly as planned. People seem to underestimate the amount of evil that is out there. Everybody, their child will be safe. You never think something like this is going to happen, but you always have to, and sometimes you can't prevent it. Mr. Romack, before he let Janett babysit his child that night, showed her the loaded shotgun that he keeps by his door and instructed her on how to use it. It didn't prevent anything, right? This offender had broken into homes before, gotten into homes somehow before, under some ruse, some guise, and definitely raped before. I believe that that was his MO. And he either progressed to murder out of necessity, meaning murder isn't what gets him off, but I have to do this because she knows me. I think that that very likely is what happened here. Remember, GSR, greed, sex, revenge. Where does this fall? This is obviously a sexually motivated crime. She was raped. The cord around her neck. Now, I don't know. I can't answer this. Whether that was the reason that she was raped. Meaning, some offenders get off on seeing that dominance, that control over the victim, watching the life disappear from their eyes. That is what satisfies them. I don't think that's the case here. I think that because the offender, it doesn't seem to me, I see no indications that he brought a weapon to that house. And you don't need to. You don't always need to. If you're a strong guy or you've strangled before and you know, hey, that's how I'm going to do this, you don't need to bring a weapon. Everybody has cords in their house. And every offender, except maybe one, has two hands. And they are weapons, and you strangle. It makes me believe that she knew her attacker, her offender. Maybe not intimately, maybe not personally, but she could be like, oh, that's Leroy. He worked down at the newsstand or whatever it is. That's what it seems like to me. Now, again, some of this is very difficult without police reports. But hey, when you're not on the job anymore and you don't have those connections to get the police reports all the time, this is what we're left with. So the assessment might be off a little bit, but we do the best with what we have. And the most important thing here is to get the name back out there. You know, I always say you're 2 generations removed from nobody knowing you. Some people, man, that bothers them. It doesn't bother me, you know, what it is. You live for now. You're here for a short amount of time. Live, make your mark, and move on. But somebody like this, who didn't get their day, you know, it's important to keep their name alive and keep it out there. Is there evidence that we could convict or find, even if the person has passed away, who's responsible for this? It all depends on how the police department saved their evidence. In 1950, they were not thinking DNA, okay? Blood typing, yes. But if the offender didn't bleed, and that's one of the other things that I would like to know for sure. The blood in the hallway, the blood in the kitchen. It's inferred that it's Janett's, but if it's the offender's, then that could change everything for me in an assessment, because I'm like, well, wait a second. Maybe he did enter through that window and cut himself. Is there blood there? I don't think that that's the case, or that would have been mentioned. You know, they would have said the offender bled when he came through the broken window. That broken window seems to me like it's a red herring. Now, one of the only reason that I put a little bit of faith in that it could have been a point of entry is the sawhorse. Okay? If that sawhorse had to be brought there from a workshop or a garage, Mr. Romack needs to tell me, hey, where was that located at? Because if he breaks the window, that's one extra step. But then to bring that sawhorse over there, because in his mind, he has to be smart. He has to be an intelligent person to say, and a cool, collected person to think, okay, I broke that window, but police are not going to believe that somebody got up there because it's too high. So I got to go find something to put there. Oh, a sawhorse. See what I mean? Just too tough of a location at 10:55, at 10:30, whatever it is, to go into. It just doesn't make sense. There's easier access. You know what the most easy access for this offender was? The front door. You know why? Because all he has to do is go and knock. That's it. She comes to the door, opens the door, you bust your way in. That's the easiest, and that's the most likely to me, is that she let him in. Or maybe not let him all the way in, but at least open the door. Hey, it's Leroy from the newsstand. Car broke down out here. You give me a hand? Can I use the phone? The breaking of glass, none of that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, it's pointing away from somebody who they know. Now, I know one of the suspects, the guy I mentioned in the beginning of this, they held a grand jury. They started scooping up people like the next day. They went and got like 10 to 20 people, sex offenders, and just brought them in. Started questioning them. It was a different time back then. They had a grand jury about this case, and they couldn't come up with any because it doesn't seem like there's any evidence. But during that grand jury testimony, the family friend, Moeller, I believe was his name, the last name, had made a statement to Mr. Romick that Janett was well developed. And then he had touched his wife's dress, whether she was wearing it or not, I don't know. And the wife was concerned and did not like being alone with this guy. Let me tell you something. Because somebody makes a statement like that or touches that's not evidence. And a grand jury should never indict somebody based off of statements. You need true physical hard evidence. Maybe he did do it. I mean, he fits some of the things that I said, right? A family friend. He knew that she was going to be there, staging it to make it look like something that maybe it was him. I'm not saying it was, because there's no evidence to support that. Sure, the criminal profile, the crime scene assessment that I did may fit him, but that's not enough to convict him. I wouldn't even arrest somebody like that. Unfortunately, it happens. But this guy's name is stuck to this case. Whenever you Google Janett Christman's name, this guy's name comes up, and it's unfortunate because he might be completely innocent, and his whole life he had to live with that. Could you imagine that? That's why I don't like talking about suspects on here, unless I know 100% that they did it. Like OJ. I know 100% in my mind that he did that. So I have no problem talking about it. I know Scott Peterson is guilty. I have no problem saying his name. Vince Doan killed Kerry Culberson. I have no doubt about that from what I saw, so I can say his name. But you can't just start saying, oh, it's Kaylee Gonzalez's father that killed them because I don't like the way he did an interview. You're a jerk if you do that. And an FBI agent pretty much said that, a retired one. He should never have a microphone in front of him ever again. Disrespectful. But I digress. We're talking about Janett Christman, the babysitter. Movies made after this case. The beginning of Scream. Remember with Drew Barrymore? When a Stranger Calls. When they trace the call and they tell the babysitter, the calls are coming from inside the house, get out. It's far-fetched here, but this is the basis of those movies. I said I would get back into the height, weight, the looks of Janett Christman. How she looks like, to me, like a 25-year-old woman. It's not because of her breasts being developed or anything like that. You don't see that. It's not the attire that she's wearing. It's just her physical, facial features. She looks like she's in her 20s. I've yet to see a photograph of her where she looks like a 13-year-old kid. And I said I would get back into whether that plays into this assessment. I don't think it does. You know, what I was thinking when I first started looking at this case was if he was casing the place, you know, looking for a victim, and he thought maybe that this girl, Janett, was actually Mrs. Romack. I've seen no pictures of her to see if they look familiar, but to be honest, all older pictures like this, they all look the same to me. And I can do that with Native Americans too. Old pictures of Native Americans, I love that culture. But when I look at Crazy Horse compared to somebody else, they kind of look the same to me. I can't tell them apart. So I don't know whether Janice looks like Mrs. Romack or not. But again, we deduced that we don't think that it's a stranger. So if somebody knew Mrs. Romack and they knew Janett Christman, they're going to know that they're not the same person and it's not a case of mistaken identity, right? Such an interesting case. There's other cases around that area where rapes had occurred or an attempted prowler situation. And I'm not one to link cases almost automatically just because of location. Think of Center County, Pennsylvania, you know, where I used to live. You have cases there, Brenda Condon, missing. Cindy Song, missing. Joey Offit, missing. Dawn Miller, which was my case, missing. All within, and there's a couple more, I think. Yeah, there is. Jennifer Cahill. All within, let's say, 10 years. Now, people want to jump in and say, well, there's a serial offender for all of them, and they make it fit. And if an uneducated or inexperienced person would read, they will believe that. But I know that that's not the case. Why? Because I worked the Dawn Miller case. I know who killed her. I got a confession. So they're not linked. So I'm not one of those people that like to link things, but I link them when evidence shows me that they should be linked. And in this case, because I believe that this guy is experienced, maybe not an experienced murderer, but experienced rapist for sure, there are going to be cases around that area within a 10, 15 mile tops radius that he is responsible for. Don't just look at the deaths. Look at just rapes, sexual assaults. prowler situations. He did one of them. There's no doubt about it in my mind. You just have to link it. And I don't know which one it is, so I can't link it. But if I was working on this case, I would be certainly looking at those other sexual assaults and seeing what evidence there ties into this. Not because both were strangled with cords. Yes, that potentially could be something, but something like, okay, this offender over in this case, a mile away, was seen leaving in a blue station wagon. Well, tie that over to here. Who does Janett know? Who does Mr. Romick know that drives a blue station wagon? That's what I mean by connecting those and trying to figure it out and work it backwards. That's what I would do in this case, and it's a very sad, sad case. All these cases are sad. But it's solvable. They're all solvable. You just have to know where to look, how to look, what to look at, start deducing possibilities to probabilities, and you come up with an offender for Miss Christman. Somebody that she knows or the Romax knows, done this before, experienced, rapist, lives, within probably walking distance, but certainly only a couple miles away. You'll figure out who did it. Okay? Thanks for watching this edition of Unsolved No More. Mains out.